Udawatta Kele Sanctuary, often spelled as Udawatta, is a historic forest reserve on a hill ridge in the city of Kandy. It is 104 hectares large. During the days of the Kandyan kingdom, Udawatta Kele was known as Uda Wasala Watta in Sinhalese, meaning the garden above the royal palace. The sanctuary is famous for its extensive avifauna. The reserve also contains a great variety of plant species, especially lianas, shrubs and small trees. There are several giant lianas, many of small and medium-sized mammals that inhabit Sri Lanka can be seen here. Several kinds of snakes and other reptiles might be seen. Udawatta Kele was designated as a forest reserve in 1856, and it became a sanctuary in 1938. The Sri Lanka Forest Department has 2 offices in the reserve, one of which has a nature education center with a display of pictures, posters, stuffed animals, etc., being easily accessible and containing a variety of flora and fauna. The forest has a great educational and recreational value. Groups of school children and students regularly visit the forest and the education center. The forest is also popular with foreign tourists, especially bird watchers. Scientific nature research has been carried out in the forest by researchers. The forest is of religious importance as there are 3 Buddhist meditation hermitages and 3 rock-sheltered dwellings for Buddhist monk hermits. History. It has been recorded that the Brahmin called Sankanda, from whose name the city's original name Sankandagolapura derives, lived in a cave in this forest. The rock shelter, a cave now known as the Sankandagolapura, is on the slope above the Temple of the Tooth and can be visited. The Sankandagolapura collapsed in a landslide in 2012. The legend says the Brahmin brought a sapling of Jayashri Mahabodhi here and planted it in the present site of Nathadevala. It was used as a pleasure garden by the Kandyan kings. The forest was reserved for the royal family, and the pond in the forest was used for bathing. The public was restricted from accessing the forest, hence the name Thathanchikele. During the colonial era, some of the land near the Temple of the Tooth was used to build the Kandy Garrison Cemetery. In 1834, Governor Horton built a path, Lady Horton's Drive, in the forest in remembrance of his wife. Henry W. Cave mentions the trail is about 3 miles long. Lady McCarthy's Drive, Lady Torrington's Road, Lady Gordon's Road, Lady Anderson's Road, Gregory Path, Russell Path, and Bird Lane are the other named walks in the forest. Some have gone into disuse long ago and are overgrown by the forest. The remains of a fortress, overgrown by the jungle, can be found on 2 hilltops in the southeastern side of the forest. Near the Forest Department Nature Education Center. Features. Udawatta Kele is on a hill ridge stretching between the Temple of the Tooth and the uplands Arupilla suburbs. The highest point of the ridge is 635 meters above sea level and 115 meters above the nearby Kandy Lake. The sanctuary contains 3 Buddhist forest monasteries, i.e. Forest Hermitage, Senana and Tapovana, and 3 cave dwellings for Buddhist monks, i.e. Chittavisudilina, Metilina and Sankadaranagalalina. The sanctuary acts as a catchment area for the supply of water to the city of Kandy. Visiting. The visitor's entrance is on the western side of the forest, about 15 to 20 minutes walking from the Temple of the Tooth. For the Temple of the Tooth, go north along the D.S. Senanayakavidiya Road and after half a kilometer turn right at the post office near the Kandy municipality, and follow the road up the hill. The entrance is on the right side of the Tapovana monastery. There is parking space for cars and vans near the entrance and a refreshment stall. The entrance fee for Sri Lankan visitors is Rs. 30. The fee for foreign visitors is Rs. 570. Sri Lankan visitors have to register and leave their identity card at the entrance. Amorous unmarried couples are not allowed to enter the forest. The Shady Lovers Walk, which runs along the banks of the Royal Pond, is the most popular walk. During rainy weather there are leeches lurking along paths that will attempt to suck blood from the feet and legs of unwary visitors. Mosquito repellent herbal balms such as Sadalapa will protect against them. Flora. The vegetation of the park comprises dense forest, mostly abandoned plantations and secondary formations. According to Udawatta, perhaps basing himself on Karunaratna, 460 plant species were growing in the forest, 135 tree and shrub species and 11 lianas. These include 9 endemic species. In 2013, a survey identified 58 indigenous tree species, 61 indigenous shrub and small tree species, 31 indigenous herbs of which 12 are orchids, and 57 indigenous lianas, creepers and vines. The forest features an emergent layer, a canopy and an understory. Because of the dense 2 upper layers, understory is not present everywhere, especially in areas with the invasive balsam of Peru tree, mahogany trees, and devil's ivy. A great variety of plant species are found in the relatively unspoiled northern and eastern sides of the forest. Some common indigenous tree and shrub species are Acronychia pedunculata, Artocarpus nobilis, Artocarpus heterophyllus, Caryota urens, Aglaya eleanoidea, Bombax ceiba, P. canarium zeylanicum, Cinnamomum verum, Ficus virens, Phylloseum decipiens, Aphananthe cuspidata, Goniothalamus gardneri, Haldana cordifilia, Hunteria zeylanica, Malatis tetracoccus, Mesuaferia, Michaelia champaca, Mangifera zeylanica, Neoclitzicacia, Glycosmus pentaphylla, Litziquinque flora, Micromelium minitum, Pavetta blanda, Psychotria nigra, Vitex pinnata and Walshura gardneri. There are many vine and liana species growing in the Udawatta forest. Most notable is the giant creeper Entardaridi. Some other species are Anemoeta cocculus, Diploclisia glaucescens, Hyptage bengalensis, Hypserpa nishida, Marinda umbellata, and Paramineu monophylla. The Udawattakele contain many full-grown rattan palms, calamuses, of which there are at least 2 species. Some of the climbing palms here are over 25 meters long, growing up and over trees. Elsewhere in Sri Lanka, rattan palms are often cut down when young for making rattan. Orchid species, mostly epiphytic, include Cymbidium bicolor, Louisa teratifolia, Polystarchus concreta, Thrixpermum pulchellum, Tropidia curculigoides and Vanda testacea. The sanctuary is home to many species of non-flowering plants, pteridophytes, such as the many kinds of ferns growing on steep banks along the Shady Road on the eastern side of the hill ridge. The invasive glossy maidenhair fern is said to crowd away native fern species, some of which are rare and not recorded elsewhere in Sri Lanka. About half of the forest, mostly on the southwestern side, is heavily invaded by exotic tree and creeper species. In these areas, very little native vegetation and fauna is able to survive. See the threat section below. In total, 16 exotic trees species grow in the forest, as well as 6 exotic shrub species, 6 exotic liana and creeper species, and 6 exotic herbs. Fauna. Udawatta is a famous bird-watching site. About 80 bird species have been recorded in the sanctuary. The endemic bird species are Layard's parakeet, yellow-fronted barbet, and brown-capped Babylopolinium fuscicapillus. The rare three-toed kingfisher Ceyx erythicus has been observed occasionally. Sri Lanka minor, golden-fronted leafbird, blue-winged leafbird, spotted dove, emerald dove, tickles, blue flycatcher, white-rumped shama, crimson-fronted barbet, brown-headed barbet, crested serpent, elephant eagle, Sri Lanka hanging parrot and black-backed kingfisher are common in the forest. Red-faced malkoha and Kashmir flycatcher are two birds listed as threatened that can be found in Udawattakele. Despite the forest reserve being completely surrounded by Kandy and its suburbs, there are many kinds of mammals, most of which are nocturnal. Endemic mammals that can be seen in the sanctuary are the pale-fronted toque macaque, golden palm civet, mouse deer, slender loris, and the dusky palm squirrel. Other mammals are the porcupine, Indian muntjac, Indian boar, Asian palm civet, small Indian civet, ruddy mongoose, Indian giant flying squirrel, greater bandicoot rat, Indian pangolin, greater false vampire bat, and Indian flying fox. Several kinds of reptiles and amphibians, including endemic species, inhabit the forest. There are snakes such as the common hump-nosed pit viper, green vine snake, green pit viper, banded kukri, Bowie's rough-sided snake, Sri Lanka cat snake, oriental rat snake, and spectacled cobra. Lizards that can be seen include the green forest lizard, Sri Lanka kangaroo lizard, and the whistling lizard. Many species of skinks, geckos, frogs, and toads also inhabit the forest. Some Sri Lanka wet zone butterflies are present. Other invertebrate include giant forest scorpions, Heterometrus spp, spiders such as the poisonous Sri Lankan ornamental tarantula, fireflies, beetles, jewel bugs, bees, and wasps. At least 9 species of endemic land snails such as the large.During superbus live in the forest. Threats. Udawatta Kele Sanctuary has suffered from encroachment by squatters and land grabbing by surrounding landowners in the past, but the forest ecosystem is now mainly threatened by highly invasive, introduced exotic plant species that increasingly crowd native plant and tree species and the animals and insects that live on them. The invasive tree and creeper species have no natural enemies such as diseases or insects and animals that feed on them and therefore grow and multiply much more rapidly than in the native habitats. About half of the forest is already heavily or completely invaded and smothered by exotic, invasive trees and creepers. 3 introduced species pose the biggest threat to the natural biodiversity of the Udawattakele forest. The highly invasive Peru balsam tree Myroxylon balsamum from South America is the first. Dense stands of thousands of young trees can be seen along the roads in the eastern and northern side of the forest. The Pothosa devil's ivy, Epipremnumorium creeper from Solomon Islands, is the second major threat. In the northwestern and western part of the reserve, around the Royal Pond and near the Presidential Palace and Temple of the Tooth, the creepers completely cover several hectares of the forest floor. They also climb high up tree trunks, with their large leaves blocking the light for other species underneath. The creepers are gradually spreading further to the east and south. Some years ago they were even planted on road banks elsewhere in the forest. Mahogany Swietony macrophylla, a timber tree from South America, is quite invasive and disrupts the forest's diverse ecology. Coffee shrubs are invasive in parts of the forest, as they are in the nearby Ganirua Forest Reserve at Paradenia. The glowvine, Saratarea magnifica, from Brazil is another invasive species, and covers several trees near the Royal Pond and near the Métis Cave. In some areas Aglaeonama communatum, Philippine evergreen, covers the forest floor and road banks. Severely degraded forest areas are between the Temple of the Tooth, the Forest Department office at the western entrance, and the slopes northeast of the Royal Pond. A few patches of unspoiled forest, with mostly native species of trees and shrubs, remain on the northern and eastern sides of the forest. There is a patch of native forest near the Forest Department office at the southeastern entrance. Despite the forest being of great educational, scientific, ecological, historical and cultural value. The Forest Department has no management plan to maintain the biodiversity and remove the invasive species to restore and protect the native vegetation. Necessarily control measures would be the uprooting of seedlings, collecting and destroying seeds, and removal of mother trees and creepers. Pictures of the Udawatta forest.